So, last time, when we left our heroes the previous adventure, they were kind of clearing out the basement of a church. Let's see, how much of a total recap do I need to do? So, this is a my little like roll 20 conversion of a classic adventure called Against the Cult of the Reptile God. And the basic premise is that this small town of Orlane, which I just kept the name, has been kind of taken over by a cult, more or less, like 50% or so. Uh, looks like a murder hobo sanctuary. Yeah, well, it turned into one. They sure cleared it out. I didn't expect them to engage with all floors of this, and I don't know why I expected that. That was a silly thing. That was a silly expectation to have. Um, so in this town, there's trouble right here in Orlane City. Um, Cult has moved in. They've been kidnapping people, kind of mind controlling them into joining the cult, more or less. The head of the cult is like um, this Naga called Explicita Defilis, and she has been converting the town over the course of like a year and a half to worship her. And I've kind of like worked it into my campaign where like the old gods have kind of disappeared, and now other powerful beings are being elevated into divinity, and Explicita Defilis is trying to take advantage of this. Um, and she is posing as the previous kind of goddess of life, Denala. And so the party is on the hunt to find Explicita Defilis. They now have her name. They know that her lair, after clearing this out, they know that her lair is not here in town. So they basically spent last session trying to figure out where that lair is. And they rescued a kid who had been kind of kidnapped by one of the most deranged cultists here, which is like probably a more happy thing than sad thing, because the alternative was being fed to a crocodile, and the party rescued him before anything untoward happened. But, being captured by the cult tormentor is not perhaps the best week to have. So, they took an awful long time getting out of this temple, and I probably should have just... I feel like I should have moved it along, especially since, like, spoilers, one of my players left after, like, quit the campaign after this session. He's been having a little bit of trouble with the campaign, hasn't been super enjoying it, so last session was kind of his, like, all right, this is my one last try, and it didn't, it's just going too slow for him. And I felt a little bad about that. I felt like maybe I should have been pushing things along to keep it fun for everyone, but at the same time, there's kind of a fallacy that it is the GM's job to make sure everything is fun for everyone, but the game was fun for 4 out of 5 people. 4 out of 5 people are super enjoying themselves, and then there was one who was like, nah, this game is not my pace. And I think he was kind of expecting me to fix it for him, but the advice I should have given him, and the advice I would give anyone else in this position, if the game you're in isn't fun for you, talk to... And it's like because the players are slowly deliberating things that you don't find interesting. Try talking to the other players and be like, hey, can we cut down on some of the like completely ancillary RP just a little bit? And it's entirely possible that they'll say no, but sorry for the cam shake. I think that's a more democratic way to go about it than like, DM, I'm not having fun. What can you do for me? And sometimes the DM and the player can fix it on their own, but, I feel like this was mostly a player mismatch, and I don't want to push the other 4 along just to make it more fun for him. That said, it did take a full hour to leave a church that was fully cleared. So, I do understand the frustration a little bit. They were like, hey, we beat up some monks in here. We could be kind of on the we don't really like the constable here either. We could be on his shit list, and he could like talk the mayor into letting him arrest us, and like it could be a bad time. So we should like really strategically think about how we're going to leave this church. Um, and perhaps that should have been a cue for me to set up some conflict outside, but I could have done something. I don't know. I feel like the way it worked out was a bit better, but that is something I could have done. Is seen their worry and then rewarded that worry with something, kind of a Schrodinger's ambush, more or less. Yeah. The best way to murder a cult in a village is to murder the entire inhabitants. They're kind of halfway there. They've like driven a lot of the townspeople out. They've fed a lot to crocodiles. It's definitely a turn or be eaten kind of situation, and people aren't really super down for it. Um, and yeah, always expect your party to do the worst case scenario. Yeah. To be fair, I did do the prep to make sure I was ready if they did decide to just plow through this entire dungeon. I was like, I'm just gonna stock the whole thing with fights, do prep for like every possible area, and I didn't do any of the shared fights between rooms or anything. So I was pretty ready for them to go ham on this place. I just didn't expect it. And they almost missed the basement, but they accidentally stumbled on the trapdoor to fall down there. So let's see. Yeah, after finally leaving the church, they got word from the mayor that the constable left with the head priestess, basically, the leader of the church who is in league with the cult. They have their own free will. They're one of the only people who do. The constable like left with her to protect her or something. He was seen leaving with her. And no one knew where they went. And so the party did a little prep, and they were like, all right, so the next step, like, we can follow the constable and the priestess, or we can figure out where this base is, where the lair of the reptile god is, where we can find Explicita Defilis, and we can bet that we'll find them there. So they did a little bit of prep in town. They bought a couple of things, while one player kind of scoped out the outskirts of town to see if he could pick up anything, and he rolled exceptionally well on his scouting lore skill check. And then his follow-up survival skill checks to track. He found some like wagon wheel tracks basically leading out of town. And he followed it for a while. He saw that it led into the swamp, followed it back to one of the farms in town, this one in the north, saw that there were some rutted tracks leading in and out of this farm, found a lot of evidence that basically the cult was like shepherding people through here. So they got more or less a pretty clear trail to follow to find the cult and to, figure out where this lair was. So, the alternative is that they would have struck out east and they would have just done, survival checks. They would have looked around in the hexes, kind of engaged with the exploration mechanics on this map. Just, probably, where are we? Kind of down here. They would have slowly searched through these hexes, and that would have allowed some time to pass, which would have allowed the cults to regroup a little bit. Since they found those tracks, they got to kind of catch up faster, and they stumbled into... I think this is the one, yeah. So I just played this as they caught up to the cart. It's a pretty busy map, so it's kind of a lot going on here. But they caught up to the cart. Cart got stuck in the swamp, as happens. Swamps are not kind to wooden wheels. And yeah, they engaged with... The priestess was here, the constable was here. Those were the two main bad guys. They had... the priestess had pretty clearly tamed these two crocodiles. And yeah, they took this down without too much trouble. It was a pretty fun fight. There was a lot of interactions with trying to wake up and save the townspeople, trying to... they had a NPC friend, this Marius Devol, the whole reason why they're in town. saved him from some crocodiles that were. This guy was like basically they would have attacked the party, but since the party immediately took out the priestess, as happens to all boss monsters, the crocodiles kind of went. They were no longer under her control, so they just attacked at random based on dice rolls. So, at one point they chopped on a cult member. At another point, they like knocked down one of the. There's kind of two sets of villagers here. There's a set that is like super indoctrinated, and a set that is dazed. You know, they're like in preparation to be indoctrinated into the cults, but they're not there yet. So basically, they're more savable, more immediately savable than the others. And so, yeah, the crocodile chewed through one of those, but they took it down before it reached their NPC friend, and yeah, they kind of took care of this without too much trouble. And oh yeah, greens and blues. So I use kind of I have some tiles or some tokens, and it basically just goes like blue is party member or like obvious ally. Green is ambiguous or kind of a neutral ally, basically, and red is an obvious enemy. And with this kind of cult situation, I just left. I left all the enemies as green. Just kind of a. Keeping low on the ludonarrative dissonance. Like, it's obvious to the party that these are enemies, but with the situation, you know, just like speaking to the theme through mechanics. Not like a big deal, but you know. Cats are making noises upstairs. Anyway, so yeah, normally like half of these guys would have been red in a fully scouted situation. And yeah, that was really it. As I mentioned before, they took some time like leaving the church. They took some time leaving town, and then they got here. They did some RP, and then I put them at the start of this dungeon, which is something I put together a couple of weeks ago on stream. If you want to check that out in the VODs, they entered this, which is kind of the downed fragment of a floating city that the party kind of like world built together before we started this. This whole world is kind of put together from a wonderful game called Microscope, which is a great like world building game, and that's where a lot of this stuff is seated in like conversations that we had before we even started the campaign. So it's a really cool experiment, and I've really enjoyed how that's gone. I will say not having 100% ownership of the world made it kind of confusing to start up and to like fill it with things and to make it like. Obviously, as the DM, I still have to make it my own, and I struggled with that for like a couple of weeks, I would say. So yeah, next they'll push through here, and we'll see how many sessions that takes. I almost think it'll take a session and a half per floor, but maybe they'll surprise me and they'll clear it out faster. They do only have 4 people now, so that kind of speeds things up pretty naturally on its own. So yeah, let's see. Things that I could have improved on. I definitely could have signaled that there wasn't so much danger leaving the church, so they kind of moved along past that faster. That was like it was a very long discussion over something that didn't end up having any real fruit to it. I should have either signaled that it was okay to leave and that it wasn't a big deal, or I should have given something to that tension. It's like reward their concern with something, you know? And I think the fight went well. I think everything after that was pretty good. It was just too late to save the one player's interest. Yeah. So I guess that was a pretty fast campaign diary. I think we'll just move right on to making the dungeon. Like that was, there's not much to talk about that session. When you spend that much time in the church,